Hi SILEM stars, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, please subscribe down below. It's free and it does help my channel grow a whole lot. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to make a shawl collar jacket with a peplum. Now this shawl collar jacket actually is also a wrap jacket. So if you want to see how to make this from start to finish, including the drafting and the stitching process, then definitely keep on watching.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there.
So we're going to start off with drafting our back piece. The first thing I'm doing is I'm drawing my baseline. From the baseline, I'm just marking my bust point, which is 10 inches. And then after that, I'm marking my under bust 13 inches and then my half length line, which is 17 inches. So go ahead and mark your bust point, under bust and half length lines. And after that, what I'm doing now is I'm just going ahead to also mark my armhole line, which is 8 inches. And then after that, I went ahead to extend all those lines. So just do the same, mark all those lines and then extend them. Now I'm dividing my shoulder measurement by 2 and that gave me 7 inches. I'm marking that. Initially, I wanted to put a 1 inch allowance, but I changed my mind and I made it half inch allowance. So that's 7.5 inches. I'm just marking that same thing on my armhole line. Then I'm connecting that to the point I marked on my shoulder line. Okay, so just make sure you have the same measurements on the shoulder line and on the armhole line. Now I'm just getting the midpoint of that line and that gave me 4 inches. And then I'm dividing my bust circumference by 4, placing that on the armhole line and marking that. And then I added 2 inches allowance to that. Now I'm just going to draw a curve from that 2 inches allowance point to the midpoint of that line. So just connect both points with a curve. And I'm just going down from the shoulder line by half an inch. And then I'm marking the width of my neck, which is 3.5 inches, and then the depth is 1 inch. Okay, now it's important that you use the depth of your back to be 1 inch because this is a shawl collar jacket and you want the back neckline to be quite high. After that, I'm just slanting my shoulder, okay, just to get my shoulder slope. Now I'm just labeling all the lines. The first line is the armhole line, AL, bust point BP, UB, under bust, and HL half length line. Now on the half length line, I'm just dividing my round under bust by 4, marking that and adding 2 inches allowance. Now I just marked from the edge of the paper, I'm just marking 4 inches so that I can create my dart. So I'm marking 4 inches on the half length line, on the under bust line, and on the bust point line. I marked the same 4 inches and then I connected them all together with a straight line. And then on both sides of that line, I'm going out by ½ inch. So ½ inch on both sides. And then I'm connecting those points to the bust points, okay? And that will create my dart. Now that 1 inch I marked for my dart, I'm just replacing that on my half length line. And then I'm connecting the point on the half length line to the point on the armhole line. And that's basically it for our back piece. It's really not complicated. Much of the work goes into drafting the front piece, okay? The back piece is pretty straightforward. So this is the back piece, okay, and that is the fold right there. Now for my front piece, you want to make sure you're using a very wide paper, okay? Now from the edge of the paper, I'm just marking 7 inches inwards, okay? Just mark 7 inches and then just draw a line to connect those points. Now this is the line right at the center of the paper. Now I'm going to place my half length measurement at the bottom of the paper and then I'm going to mark my under bust point, armhole line, and then the 0 mark, okay? So I placed my half length line on the bottom of the paper and then I marked my bust point, under bust, armhole line, and the 0 mark, and I also extended those lines. Now I'm just going ahead to label those lines just like I did for my back piece. Now I'm just dividing my shoulder circumference by 2, marking that on the 0 mark or the shoulder line, and then I added ½ inch. I marked that same measurement on the armhole line and connected them just like I did for the back piece. Now for the width of my neck is 3.5 inches and then the depth of my neck is 4 inches, okay? So I'm just drawing a curve to connect those 2 points. Now I divided my bust circumference by 4. I marked that and then I added 2 inches allowance to that. I also divided that line into two. I got the midpoint, I marked that point, and then I went inward by half an inch. It's important that you go in by half an inch because it gives a better fitting for the front piece. And then I just drew a curve to create my armhole. Now on the under bust line, make sure that you're starting from that line at the center. I'm just marking 4 inches. Okay, that will serve as my dart on the under bust line. I also mark that same 4 inches on the half length line. Make sure you're doing this from the line at the center, okay, which is the first line I marked. Now on both sides of the dart line, you want to go in by half an inch and then just connect that all the way to the under bust point. Now I divided my round under bust by 4. I marked that on the half length line. I added 2 inches allowance, and then I replaced the 1 inch that I marked for my dart. Okay, I just replaced that 1 inch, and I'm just connecting the point on the half length line to the armhole line. Okay, now for my shoulder, I'm just going to go down by ½ inch to create my shoulder slope, and I'll connect it to the width of my neckline. Now this is the front piece. I'm just labeling that right now. Now, to get to the more tricky parts to create the shawl collar, from that line at the center, I'm just marking 3.5 inches. Okay. Now that 3.5 inches, I'm going to connect it to the width of my neckline. Now this is my back piece. Okay. Now I'm just measuring the width of my back neckline, and that gave me 4 inches. Okay. Now take note of that because we'll use it to draft the front piece. Okay. 4 inches, remember, for my back neckline. Now I'm just going up from the shoulder of my front piece by that same 4 inches. Okay, that same 4 inches I measured on the neck of my back piece. I'm just marking that same 4 inches, and I'm just extending the shoulder upwards. Okay, extending the shoulder upwards. Now I'm just going to go outwards by ½ an inch. Okay, so when you have that 4 inches, I'm just going out by ½ an inch. Okay, and then I'm getting the midpoint of that 4 inches, which is 2 inches, and I'm just going to connect that 2-inch point to that ½ point I marked. Now this will make the collar more curved and it will fit better around the neck. Now on that new line I marked, I'm just placing the 3.5 inch mark there, and then I'm marking the 0-inch point. So does that make sense? So I just simply marked 3.5 inches from the new line that I marked, and then I drew a straight line from that point, and I marked that same 3.5 inches all along that line. Just mark 3.5 inches all along the line because that is the width of the collar. So I'm just connecting all those points together. Now if you want your collar to be wider, you can make this measurement wider. You can make it 4 inches, 5 inches, depending on how wide you want your collar to be. Now in order to make the collar fit even better, I'm going to go up again from that point by 1.5 inches, and then I'll extend the line and then connect it back down to the previous line I marked. Okay, this will make the collar fit way better. Now once we're done with that, we're practically done with the drafting. As you can see, it was actually very easy. So I'm just cutting along, the outline. I'm just marking the midpoint of my shoulder and I'm connecting that to my dart. Now this is going to give me a guide on how I'm going to cut my facing. Okay, so from this point I'm going to cut my facing to that point, and then the rest will be my lining. Now I'm just indicating that I'm going to be cutting 2 pieces of this front piece. Now moving on to the cutting of the pieces, I just left ½ inch around all the pieces. This is my back piece right here, and I'm also going to go ahead and mark my dart on my fabric. As you can see, this is my fabric and this is my lining. I'm going to be adding the darts to the pieces separately. So I'm going to put the darts on the lining piece separately and the darts on the fabric piece separately. Okay, very important. Now for my front piece, as you can see, this is what I have. I've gone ahead to cut 2 pieces of my fabric. This is my fabric right here. I also left ½ inch around all the pieces. Now for my lining, as you can see, I've gone ahead to cut my facing. I told you that the line I marked on my pattern is a guide on how I'm going to cut my facing. So this line here, I just folded my pattern paper like this. As you can see, I use this part to cut my lining and I use this part here to cut my facing. Okay, so that's how you're going to place yours and cut yours. because you want your facing to be wide enough. So when the collar is folded, the fabric still shows and the lining doesn't show. Okay, so now in order to join my facing to my fabric, I'm going to go ahead and place them right sides facing. I'm going to join them together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, I'll do the same thing for the other piece. Okay, so you want to cut 2 pieces of your lining, 2 pieces of your facing, and then join them together. Now after that, this is what we're going to have. This is my fabric piece, and now this is now my lining piece. I won't be calling it my facing again. This is my lining piece. As you can see, I had gummed the facing with hairstay before joining it to the lining, so make sure you do that. Now I'm also marking my darts, okay, on my front piece. So I'm going to be adding my darts on the fabric, okay. Add the darts to the fabric separately, and then add the darts to the lining separately. So what I'm doing now is I'm just marking the darts on my fabric piece. I'm also going to mark the darts on my lining as well. Okay, so go ahead and insert your dart on both pieces, both the fabric piece and the lining piece. Now make sure you do the same thing for the back piece. Put your darts on the fabric and on the lining separately. Okay, so now that we're done putting our darts, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place the lining on top of my fabric piece, and then I'm going to join them along that neckline with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now after joining it, I also went ahead to iron it flat. Make sure that your ironing is very neat. Okay, and this is what it looks like. As you can see, I've joined the fabric to the lining for both pieces. Now for your neck, you want to go ahead and join both necks together. Okay, now first of all, open up the pieces. Okay, open them up, both of them. You have to be very pay attention to this part, guys. Okay, now make sure that your seams align for both pieces. So align the seams of both of them while they are open, and then go ahead and sew them together. Okay, sew both of them together. Now after sewing it, this is what we have. I'm going to open it up. I'm done sewing it now. So after opening it up, this is what we have. Can you see that our neck is already standing beautifully? Now take only the fabric of your back piece. I'm going to get the midpoint of my neck, the midpoint of the back neckline. I'm going to go ahead and align it to the seam of my front neckline. Remember that the seam is the midpoint as well of the neckline. Now after aligning it, I'm going to make sure that I align the back neckline with the front neckline. Remember that the neckline is different from the shoulder. Okay, please guys, point to this point is the front neckline, this point to this point is the back neckline. So align them together. You'll see that they match, and then go ahead and pin them together. Now as you can see, this is the shoulder for the back and this is the shoulder for the front. So make sure you align the shoulders together. So after aligning the midpoints of the neckline of the front and back, align the rest of the neckline, and then align the shoulders together. So let's do the same thing on the other side. Align the neckline of the front piece and the back piece together. Once you get to the end of the neckline, and go ahead and align the shoulders of the front and the back together. Okay guys, this is the make or break point. You need to get this part, and that's why I'm taking my time to explain it. Now go ahead and sew the pieces together just the way you've pinned it with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now when you're done, this is what you're going to have. Now the next thing you want to do is take the lining of your back piece, get the midpoint of the neck. Okay, now place the right side of that lining back piece facing the wrong side of the front piece. Okay, now align the neck of the back piece lining with the neck of your piece that you've already sewn. Now also align, after aligning the midpoint of the neck, align the rest of the neck and also align the rest of the shoulders. Make sure you pin it as you go along. Now on the other side, do the same thing. Align the rest of the neck, pin it in place, and then align the shoulders as well. Now go ahead and join it with 1/2 inch seam allowance, and when you open it, can you see how neat it is? Okay, this covers all the seams that you made when you were joining the necklines together and the shoulders. It's very neat. Now once you just arrange your pieces, what you're going to have now, once you fold the neck, can you see how neat the shawl collar is? It's very easy to do if you understand the steps and you follow it. But since we're making a peplum, we're going to go ahead and draft our peplum. First of all, I folded my fabric lengthwise, and then I'm folding it now widthwise. I'm also folding it diagonally, so I had a total of 3 folds. Now I'm going to place the zero mark of my tape on my round under bust measurement, which is 30 inches. Now that made me fold my tape once. I'll fold my tape again the second time, and then I'm folding it the third time. Okay, the same way I folded my fabric 3 times, I'm also folding my tape 3 times. This is the easiest way to get the radius of your circle or your flare. Now after marking that point, I came down by 1 inch just to accommodate the wrap that this my peplum top has. Okay, remember that this is a wrap peplum, and then from that point I just marked the length of my flare, which is 10 inches. I just marked that, and then I cut along that curve at the bottom, and I also cut along the curve at the top. Now when you open it up, this is what you're going to have. Can you see that our peplum or our flare is ready? Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and cut the same thing on my lining. So can you see now that I've cut the same thing on my lining? I'm also indicating that that is the wrong side. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and gum my hairstay on the fabric only, and then I also cut one side of my peplum open. Okay, so I just cut one side open. Now I'm placing the lining on top, and then I'm sewing it all the way around. Make sure you're sewing it at the wider circle at the edge, okay, and not the inward circle. Now after that, I'm just going to open up my piece. Make sure that the allowance is facing the lining, and then I'm going to go ahead and top stitch. Okay, so I did this after joining the lining and the fabric together. I just made sure that the joining was facing my lining side, and then I just went ahead to top stitch. Once I'm done, this is what we're going to have. Now I'm just going to go ahead and flip the piece back to the wrong side. Now make sure that you pull your lining upwards a bit so that you can see at least ½ inch of your fabric while you're looking at the lining. Okay, so just pull it all the way around. Can you see that I can see my lining a bit? Okay, just pull it like that, and then go ahead and close that end that you had opened previously. Okay, and then I'm just going to turn it to the right side. Can you see that we can see a bit of the fabric while we're looking at the lining? This is very important because you want your peplum to have a very neat finish. Can you see that all the way around I can see a bit of my lining? And when you turn it, you cannot see any of the lining when you're looking at the fabric. Now all you have to do is just join the center. Okay, join the fabric and the lining along that inner circle. Okay, in the center, just join it, and then trim off any excess lining that you have. Okay, now this is the way to turn your flare fabric with your lining without hemming gum, and it still looks very neat. Now moving on to my the top part of my peplum top, I'm just folding the back piece in half, and then I'm just marking my bust circumference divided by 4. Okay, and I'm also marking my round under bust divided by 4 at the half length point there, and I'm connecting those 2 points together. Okay, I'm going to be using this now to shaping this top piece. I'm folding that back piece again, but the reverse way, and then I'm making sure that I mark that same measurement on the other side. And after that, I'm just going to go ahead and fold my piece the right way, and then I'm going to go ahead and pin the front piece and the back piece together, because I'm going to go ahead and use those lines I marked on the back piece to shaping this piece. I'm going to go ahead and shaping the front piece and the back pieces along those lines. After that, this is what we're going to have. Can you see how neat it looks? And now I'm just going to open up my piece. Okay, open up my piece, and then I'm going to place my peplum on that half length point there, on that half length line. I'm just going to place my piece on the half length of the top, and then I'm going to go ahead and join both pieces together with ½ inch seam allowance. You can go ahead and pin them so that you're sure that it fits right. So pin it so it's easier for you to sew, and then join them with ½ inch seam allowance. Can you see how lovely our peplum looks? Now remember that when you're joining the peplum to the top, make sure that your collar is folded. Very important. Make sure your collar is folded before you join your peplum so it stays folded. Now I'm just marking the midpoint of my piece, and I'm placing the midpoint of my shoulder, which is 7 inches, on that midpoint, and then I'm marking the 0 mark on one shoulder and the 14-inch mark on the other shoulder. Remember that my shoulder is 14 inches, okay? So I'm just marking my shoulder measurement there, and then I added an extra ½ inch for my stitching allowance. Now from the shoulder downwards, I just marked my armhole line, which is 8 inches. I did that on one shoulder and I did that on the other shoulder as well. And once I was done with that, I just simply trimmed my armhole, okay? So make sure that when you marked your shoulder, you leave an extra ½ inch allowance for your stitching, and then go ahead and trim your shoulder, okay? And I'm just going to go ahead and measure my armhole, okay? And what I have there was 9 inches. I'm going to take note of that when I am shaping my sleeve. Now for my sleeve, I'm just folding my fabric. Now the length of my sleeve is 23 inches, so I'm just marking the 0-inch mark after placing the 23 at the edge of my fabric. Now I'm just drawing a straight line. From that 0-inch mark again, I'm just marking the 5-inch mark. And on that 5-inch mark, I'm marking my round sleeve circumference divided by 2. And then I added 2 inches allowance to that. Now for the hem of my sleeve, I just divided my wrist circumference by 2 and I added 1.5 inches allowance to that. I'm just connecting those points, okay? And then I'm just drawing a diagonal line to meet, the edge of my fabric, and then I'm drawing a curve to create the armhole. After that, I'm just cutting my sleeve. After cutting my sleeve, this is what we're going to have. I just cut the same thing on my lining. Now to turn my lining and my fabric together, I'm just placing the pieces right sides facing. Now my lining is actually 1.5 inches shorter than my sleeve, okay, so that I have a very neat finish. Now I'm just making sure that the lining and the fabric are equal at the hem, okay, and then I'm just going to join both of them with ½ inch seam allowance. After joining them, I open it up and I top stitch the allowance, making sure that it was facing the lining, and then turning it back to the way it was when I initially started. I'm just going to go ahead and join the lining and fabric together by the sides, and then I'm turning them to the right side, okay, and this is what it looks like. And after that, I'm just going to go ahead and join the lining and fabric at the top, okay, to make sure that it's one piece. And I'm folding my piece. I'm marking my round sleeve divided by 2, and then I'm also marking the wrist divided by 2 at the hem of the sleeve, and I'm just connecting those 2 points together. Now remember that I had measured my armhole on my peplum top and I got 9 inches, so I'm making sure that I have that same 9 inches when I measure the armhole of my sleeve, and I'm just adjusting to make sure that I have that same 9 inches, so that I'm sure that the sleeve is going to fit into the armhole of my peplum top. Now I'm just going to go ahead and just join the sleeve along that line, and when I turn it to the right side, this is what we have here. Now taking my peplum top, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that the seam of my sleeve aligns with the side seam of my peplum top, okay? Just make sure that they both align. And I'll just go ahead and pin them together. And then once I have that, I'm just going to open up my peplum and then make sure that I'm grabbing the sleeve from the inside, okay? Grabbing the sleeve from the inside, and then I'm just going to go ahead and pin the sleeve to the peplum top, making sure that the armhole aligns. Can you see? And that will give me a loop. Now just the way I pinned this, I'm just going to go ahead and sew the sleeve to the peplum top along, the armhole there. I'll do that for the other sleeve as well. Now for the wrap of my peplum, you need a rope to hold it in place. Now the width of my rope is 4.5 inches and the length is 33 inches, okay? And I cut 2 pieces of this, okay, for both sides of my wrap top. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half, okay, lengthwise, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew it closed, okay, sew the end closed and sew it along the length, and then I'm going to turn it from the other end that's open, okay, turn it to the right side and then iron it flat. Now this is what it looks like once I'm done with that. I'm also going to go ahead and close up that open edge, and then I'll go ahead and sew it to the very edge of, you know, my wrap there, okay, to the very edge of my top. I'm just going to go ahead and sew that down. I'll do the same thing for the other rope as well. I'll sew it to the very edge of my top, making sure that I sew it at the point where the top and the peplum meets, okay, so at that half length point there, that's where I'm going to sew it. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take one side of my side seam. I'm going to go ahead and tack at the top and at the bottom. I just marked a point on that side seam. I marked a point and then I left a space of about 1 inch, and then I marked another point. Now I'm going to tack those 2 points, and I'm going to loosen the seam in between the points. That will create a hole where I can pass my rope through and then use it to tie the wrap peplum on my body, okay. And this is what it looks like. This is actually my client's outfit. Don't mind that I was saying my this is actually my client's outfit, and I really love how this lovely peplum top turned out. Please like this video if you found it helpful. If you want to learn how to make this pencil trouser, just click the box on the left of your screen and I'll see you in that video. Bye.